Good morning. Welcome to the second hour of the Mid-Morning Buzz. Today, Monday, the 9th of March, 2020. Those of you just joining us on television for the second hour, welcome to the program. Of course, the radio listeners, you've been riding with us since early o'clock, and you continue to do so. And those of you on social media platforms, you are with us for this next hour. Welcome, 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 everyone. We have a special program this morning. And we have three guests with us in studio. And I know you've seen the faces. And you pull up a chair. And you're wondering what big is about to happen, right? The Grenada Trades Union Council. They're about to celebrate a big birthday, have a big birthday party, so to speak. Formed on the 13th of March, 1955. So it's their anniversary. And of course, they are commemorating in a big way. And some stalwarts of the TUC, trade unionism, activism, public service, community service. They are here with us this morning. So we say good morning to Mr. Elliot Bishop. Mr. Bishop is the former president of the CIWU, and of course he was the treasurer of the TUC for quite a number of years. And of course he's here this morning with all the wealth of knowledge and service to the TUC. Mr. Bert Patterson, he's no stranger. He's the General Secretary of the TUC and also the General Secretary of the very powerful GTAU. He's here this morning. And Mrs. Madonna Harford, Lady Madonna Harford, I call her. And of course, no stranger. Great life in public service, community service, trade unionism and all of that. And she was a former president of the TUC Public Workers Union and all of that. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning, Brenda.
My chair just went down 2 notches. I don't know everything to go down with you. But good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for coming in. And congratulations on your celebrations, commemorations, and all of that. In terms of the life of the union. I was just making some little notes before you came in, and when as a worker, I'm like, okay, unions, what are they supposed to do? And trade unions, councils, kind of thing. So I put down here, changing the world of work for good. Mm-hmm. Is that what it is about?
It's part of it, but you're part of it.
All right. So tell me the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Brenda, we want to say a special morning to the listening public. Mm-hmm. And also we want to salute all women of our nation. Yesterday was International Women's Day. Right. We want to salute the women of the trade union movement in Grenada, the Caribbean, and throughout the world. Women have played a very active role in the trade union movement. Maybe some of them may not have been able to rise to the level of presidents or even vice presidents, but they did play a very important role in management of executive councils and of unions. Indeed. Women, I salute you and will always salute you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mrs. Harford. That's a really great place to start. Thank you for doing that. I'm sure you men echo the same.
Well, yes, and let me just say with the first statement that although TUC is made up of all the unions in Grenada being affiliates,
okay,
and that accounts for somewhere between 10 and 9,000 members, right? Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, we actually represent all the workers of Grenada, because we are the standard setters. So when the union brings something to its workers, that is how other workers are judged.
Right.
So
okay, got you.
All the benefits that all workers in Grenada enjoy now is not as a result of anyone else, but in fact, those rights have been achieved and those benefits have been achieved by unions. And everyone else, even if it takes some years, tend to get them because they become standard. So when we celebrating this 65th anniversary, it is, although it is the TUC because we head the labor movement, it is a celebration for all workers in Grenada because we have brought everyone else along.
Right. So you're like an umbrella
body.
An umbrella
Yes,
body.
it's an umbrella body, and all the affiliates are attached to the TUC.
That's a lot of members, and I mean to generalize it in terms that it really covers labor in general, not whether you're a card-carrying union member or not.
There's no worker in Grenada then that has not benefited directly from the rights and benefits that would have been achieved first by the unions, and which would have gone off to everyone else or run off or whatever what word you want to use, would have run off to all the other workers.
Okay. Well, Mr. Bishop, 13th March 1955. We've come a long way. We're in 2020, but the mandate, the goals, what was happening in Grenada at the time that when the TUC came together, and just take us up the road as to,
Well, to answer that question, it's important to go right back to the 1920s. 1920s, that is the first time workers started advocating for trade union representation. Of course, we had the GUT, which was formed in 1913. But at that time, under the colonial government, there was no law governing trade union, formation of the trade union. And in the 1920s, you had ex-servicemen that were serving in World War I coming back to Grenada. You had construction workers from the Panama Canal coming back to Grenada. So these workers need jobs. And there were no jobs. So this is like the genesis of the real thing. And then Mary Shaw and George Otway and Maras Donovan, the three men came forward and started representing the interests of workers, and they formed the Grenada Working Men's Association. So that is it. That is how it started. Now, the first worker struggle was very disorganized, right? And they was not really organized. It is said that they even tried to burn down the city of St. George by pressing their demands. And but of course, the colonial government at the time quickly quelled it by organizing special police and those sort of things. And by 1921, they regrouped. But this time, it was they were able to establish contacts with trade union from Trinidad, and got people to come over and give lectures to them and so on. And this time, they were very, very, very organized. And just leading up to how the thing came about. Laws were passed by government increasing prices of basic food items, and then they are again took to the streets. And march up to the governor at the time. In those days was the governor general, led by Mary Shaw and Otway and so on. And they were demanding the repeal of the law, and they succeeded. But Mary Shaw went further, asking for trade union recognition, because there was no trade union recognition in Grenada. And he was sent to England to advocate on behalf of the workers of Grenada. And in 1933, the laws were passed officially recognizing trade union.
Interesting.
But to go up to 55, I'm sure my other colleagues would like to. But that is how trade union recognition came about.
That's interesting. I mean, it's like we see these things and we just kind of take them for granted, not knowing the struggle and the history behind it.
Just to support Brother Elliott's point, during the period 1920 to 1921, you remember the only union that was there in Grenada was the Grenada Union of Teachers, 1913. And then you didn't have any other union until 1931. Yes, so you see the Marichaud and the Donovan and Otway, they felt that the majority of the working class in Grenada, they were not unionized because it was only teachers. Okay. So they wanted to make a union that would really represent the balance of workers in the country. Okay. So when the 1931 came, maybe some civil servants headed by our first president, Hagley, they decided to make Public Workers Union. It was then CSA, the Civil Service Association.
Oh, that's where CSA
came. Yes, CSA is the same Public Workers Union. And they changed the name, I think it was in 1980 during the Revolution time. Yes, so you had this big body of workers that were underrepresented, had no voice, etc. So the Marichauds and the Donovan and the Otway decided, let us give those persons a voice. Let us represent those persons. So this is how you find they were representing the other groups. So the first union, they were headquarters in St. John's, Yeah, and then therefore there was a split now. So the St. John's kept the branch, and then the Otways and the Marichaud decided to have a branch in St. George's. So there were two large branches, but they had their own names. One was the Grenada Workers Union, and the other one was Grenada Workers Union, the General Workers Union and the Grenada Workers Union. So the Small, where Mr. Small, I'm sure you'd have heard about Small, that is from Guave. He really maybe pioneered that grouping in the St. John's area. Daniel Small, yes, he pioneered. And then we have to give, some persons might not want to even call the name of Sir Eric Matthew Gary, but we must give him his due. And when he came in 51, because he came from Aruba, and when he came in 51, he targeted the agricultural workers because they were the ones that were really the lowest paid in the country, doing the hardest work. Remember, it's agricultural work. And rain, sun, whatever, they have to do the work for the employers. And in those days, it was employers, the plantocracy. It was colonial days, so it's the plantocracy. So Eric Gary changed the whole shape of those things when he decided, listen, they have to, and he had demonstrations too, because he made sure that the demands he wanted to meet for the poor people, the vulnerable people, the agricultural workers in the country.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. So basically, the 1951, the entrance, agricultural workers at the time, I'm sure, and that, what we probably call the basic, people doing basic. Yeah. That was a large group of people.
Yes.
But that was the largest group, actually, but unrepresented.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Because teachers already formalized, public workers.
CSA was already.
And that sort of explains to some extent the formation of the TUC, because they were the largest group. And let me say that the employers were also organized.
Okay.
Because you had the employers in the agricultural sector being together, and the TUC would have been formed with the introduction of the field workers to unions. Then you had a situation where they had to be represented. I think the E.M. Gary would have filled that void, right? And as a result of all those things, starting in 51, you then had the formation of the TUC by the two unions, which were general unions, right? But actually the first duties was to negotiate with the agricultural sector at the time, who was like a body, right? And that really started modern day trade unionism in Grenada, because then you had everyone represented, not just the let us say the clerks in the stores or the government employees who were mainly administrative workers employed, but you then had everyone, including the laboring class, as it was a real class society at the time, and the laboring classes were then represented, and we must say, from then to now, right, we have been one of the strongest TUCs in the Caribbean, because there have been a lot of splits. So actually, some islands now have two TUCs,
Really?
right? And some falling along political lines.
Oh, I see.
But I must say, we are lucky to be the one that has stood up and stood the test of time. We have had our rifts. We have had attempts at influence and other things, but we can boast that we are one of the stronger TUCs in the Caribbean.
I mean, but just listening to everything that you've said here, if you care to comment, I mean, just, kind of analyzing what you're saying, and the period of time, in the 1920s coming up to 1951, I mean, that was a time when Grenada was really starting to form as a nation. So in terms of organization, and to use the word revolutionary, I mean, the TUC in itself had its own revolution, getting workers together and getting them organized. So it was critical in the nation's development.
I'll go beyond. Sister Harford and would have said, and Brother Mason would have said, persons like T.A. Marichaud, persons like George Otway, persons like Donovan. And if you were to look at the history of Grenada and E.M. Geary, these are the persons who not only led the union movements, but actually led the fight for us voting. If there was not this, it is we. Let's take a boast. It is we, the trade union movement, who brought one vote for one man and woman in Grenada.
That's critical.
And that is a fact that no one can dispute. So we normally not in a position to take credit and boast, but it is a historic fact that all those persons.
If you don't say, somebody else will say it's them.
People have said so, but it is actually the trade union movement that had its major agenda. Because you see, it was not only the rights for wages and conditions on the farms and conditions in the shops, etc. A major part of that fight was the social part and the political part. So which we were successful in, which is why you and I can vote today. At one time, you had to have a certain amount of land. You had to be a landowner
to be able to
vote. Right? So if you didn't have any worth, your vote was worthless. You could not vote. And it is through the labor movement, right, that this came about. So we have to be thankful of all that, because that really started in the 50s when we all got the rights to vote.
Yeah. Were we all able to vote at the same time in terms of was women and men, they got the right to vote equally? Or men voted before women in Grenada?
No, I think they got equal from age 21. It was from age 21 in those days. So yes, on upward, yes.
Unlike some of the countries that we look at as first world. Because I can assure you that in the United States, men voted
long before women.
It was the same in the UK for that matter.
That's right.
Yes.
So we kind of beat the gun in that one.
Brenda, I think our forefathers were so very militant.
Yes.
The issues were there on the table, and they fought hard to change Grenada. And that is the important thing we want to say today, that we have to really salute our forefathers for the role they played in making Grenada a better Grenada. For people to live, people to have one man, one vote. In those days we're talking about, you had to have how many acres, you had to be a owner. You have to have ownership of land for you to cast a vote. I mean, and it would have been a very sad situation. It means to say you had one set of class, you have the haves and the have-nots, and the majority would have been in the have-nots.
Oh, how far we've come.
Oh, yes, we have.
And how far we have to go.
That's right. And talking about that, because you're right, you use the word militant.
Yeah.
And then, everything that the struggle really was really against tall monkeys.
Yes.
So I'm sure I mean, trade unionism was born from, you know, the right to get equal rights, the right for people to be able to improve their living, improve their working conditions, education, and so on. And so by the very nature, you're coming up against people who are denying you that right. So then it is always contentious. So before, you know, the question I'm asking here now is engagement and interaction. How has the earlier interaction, when you took to the streets and you protest and people lost their lives, you know, all of that, I mean, coming up to independence, look at all the things that were happening and so on, to modern day, there's still fight, but in terms of how do you achieve the things you achieved, let's say 1951, 1940, has the level of that, has that changed any?
Well, it's important that you mentioned the 1940s. You know, in the 1940s in Grenada, it was a period of lulls. There was no real trade union struggles. We called it in the 1940s. So once I asked George Brizan, what could have been the reason for that? He said, well, it's a case of when your neighbor house on fire with yours, because all the other Caribbean countries in that period were up in arms and marching and so on.
Interesting.
And Grenada was virtually quiet during the 1940s until Gary came in 1950. And the Gary struggle started. And in fact, as you mentioned, it was in fact a revolution because the two unions were making demands on behalf of the agricultural workers for what? I think it was 25% increase. And Gary came and he doubled that. He said, no, man.
Okay, so
46%. Yes. And Gary said, look, he also advocated for overtime work, you know, on holidays and things. So that is why, I mean, Gary got so much support because he brought new demands on the table.
Right.
You know, not just increasing wages, but other benefits for workers.
Right.
So you see, we still.
But they were all progressive. Maybe that's why he had the support.
Yes. I suppose too, Gary would have had that experience from the Aruba situation, where persons would have been working and then you get paid for overtime and double time and etc. So Gary would have brought a new set because there was a proposal on the table for the 25% increase.
25% remaining long.
But Gary doubled it and he brought more benefits to the workers.
I think and direct to your question is that although it is always a fight for better conditions, our fight is always for better conditions, the how has changed. I would say slightly. You see, then there was no alternative to the streets.
Right.
Because then, one, the persons in power, you couldn't lobby to them. The working class or the unions couldn't lobby to the government in power because that was the colonial government.
Right.
So that's one thing that has changed. Now, whether we like the government or not, or the government like us or not, we can lobby. We can lobby to the government.
And you have to have discussions.
Right. The other thing is that there were no laws to protect us.
Right.
No, there is a labor code.
Right.
It may not be adequate, but there is a labor code. So now you can, in fact, stay within the confines of not going to the street and be heard and have influence. At that time, there was no way you could influence the policymakers or the government or the employer other than doing the things that some may consider today either radical, violent, improper, but it was a necessity.
I like the word militant.
Yes. So the other part of it, and let me just say, right, that during the 1940s, remember, we had something going on that was literally a world war. And at those times, just like even now, when we have a structural readjustment program or some outside influence, there tends to be some industrial quiet. So there would have been some industrial quiet directly or indirectly related to that period, which was a period of war that time all young people, no matter what side it is, want to go and fight war to protect the British.
Right.
Following that, again, with the returnees from places like Aruba, where working conditions were pretty good. And just for a little bit of history, E.M. Geary was actually the first person who was retrenched from Largo, the American company which operated the refineries in Aruba.
Okay.
And I know of...
That's how you returned home?
Yes, that was when you returned. So when they retrench you, you can't stay because you did not have permanent status in Aruba. You only had a working visa as such.
Okay.
Right? And it is not widely known that he was the first person who was retrenched because he was playing the big union man there, started trying to play the big union man there. So he was actually the first person retrenched and returned to Grenada. That is a bit of history that is probably
we should
not
say
written.
thanks to Largo
Yes.
for returning E.M. Geary to us.
Yes.
That's a good. What you've planted the seed there is that. I mean, before when you just took to the streets and fought and so on, that was the only arsenal you had. But then once trade unions became organized, you know how many more tools in your arsenal. And I mean, as time go along, things change, you know?
Yeah.
These days you seem to be interacting in a more... let me see, more high intelligence, you know, than and that sort of diplomacy, if you will.
I hope it's more successful. I'm not.
But maybe a mixture of both.
Well, we have not
Works.
we have not put away or sealed the other options.
Brenda, I want to say the scale of social dialogue has really changed the whole maybe militancy of a union, because you have the International Labour Organization. They would recommend social dialogue to you.
Right. And you are a member of that body,
right? Then you would have had Ireland with a social dialogue. You would have had other European countries using the social dialogue process, even as close as Barbados. Barbados would have had a huge social partners group going for a number of years, so many protocols they would have had to date. And that has really changed things when persons could come to the table and negotiate, and it has changed things a lot from how it used to happen before, where the only thing you could do was take to the streets and have the demonstrations and whatever, picket workplaces, etc. All these are important because there might come a time when you're talking, and the talking reaching nowhere.
Right.
Trade unionists must never forget that you have other options. You have your options. So if you find that social dialogue making no sense to you, you have to do what you have to do, because you are here to represent workers, and it's the interest of workers. And the thing about it is that if you do not represent your workers definitely would have a difficulty with you as a trade unionist or as a union. They would look for other unions to represent them. So trade unionists have to be very careful how they go about trying to demand things and trying to get things for the workers, and ensure that whatever gains that your forefathers would have gotten for you, you must never have that eroded at all.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of the some of the let's say the projects, achievements that as a trade union body, what are some of the most, should I say? What are some of the things that would stand out if the legacy of the TUC was to be written today? What would some of the standout things?
I would say one of the most important things would be that the workers who are unionized, most of the workers now have pension. Some of these pensions go back to before the NIS came into being, and some after.
Right.
So where NIS was always meant to be a supplementary pension, the majority of unionized workers do have some sort of past service benefit and pension. Right. Some workers have profit sharing, which is another thing that is somewhat unique to Grenada. Right. Our working time, which is as low as 35 hours per week now. That came directly from the unions, both the public sector and private sector. So I would say that our working conditions in Grenada are on par, and in some cases better than other workers in the region and internationally also. That I think we can be a good bit proud of. Right? Even if our pay might be less because of the size and scale of our economy, right? But the actual conditions of work are in fact on par or better than most regional and international countries. And
I think, sorry, I thought you...
Just before you conclude, I would really like just to go through when you this week of activities.
No, we come into that. We come into that.
Yes. I would want to say also, Brenda, a thing that we don't maybe give a lot of importance to is the maternity leave law, which was passed by the PRG government. And it was due to the urgings of the trade union, the TUC, that we were able to get the PRG to pass that law. In those days, you didn't have no maternity leave. So a mother would have to just make a baby and go back to work. If you don't have vacation leave, you either take a month no pay leave and return to work, or you have vacation, you'll use your vacation. But you see, mothers now, they have to understand that it's this trade union movement that really brought the 3 months. Some countries have it, I mean, quite nicer than us. Some may have as much as a year maternity leave, but at least the 3 months, right, paternity leave. But the trade unions have already negotiated paternity leave in our contract, or a collective agreement. Most trade unions would have that in the thing. But the fact remains that the trade union movement would have done that. But talk about lessening the hours of work. When I started as a public officer in the public service, in the government service, I worked for 44 hours per week on Saturdays as well, half days on Saturdays. And then it was the TUC and the Public Workers Union and the and all the other unions came together, and they decided that, listen, this is a way we'll have to go, because in Europe they were already reducing the number of hours. So we ended up getting a 40-hour work week, the Monday to Friday, so the Saturday was dropped off. So there are a lot of things the trade union movement would have done. In my time, you had when after the hurricane, and we had the national levy.
National Reconstruction
Levy. The trade union movement fought against the 5%, because our point was not a matter of we don't want to give up on something, but the reason we were saying, you had a lot of workers. Remember, 90% of the housing stock were destroyed, and as such every worker would have been destroyed as well. It wasn't only the government finances that would have been destroyed. So we fought hard. We had our protest day, Red Day we called it. So the movement has always been active on issues of those things, and then government agreed that the 5% had to go to 3%. It was better. Yes, 3%. It was better that time. So we fought a lot of struggles and won.
I wanted to put a little different slant. I wanted to put a different slant to the whole thing and go back to some history, because the TUC right now has what, about 7 affiliates? 7?
Yes, about 7 affiliates.
Right, but how these different affiliates come about? I mean, these are things that also need to be highlighted, because I think what started it was, you see, the negotiations for West Indian Federation. Mary Shaw was a very, very active in that whole process. And being a leader in the union, he didn't have much time for the trade union movement in those days, concentrating more on the federation thing, and that caused workers. The dock workers, or the first settler workers, that decided now, well, after realizing what Gary did, they decided to break away and form their own union. The Seamen and Waterfront Workers Union was formed, right, in 1958
or thereabout.
I think it was 55.
No, about 58 or thereabout.
No, 58 was Tau. Anyhow, we could
Yeah.
and then the clerical workers did the same. Broke away under Eric Beer, right, and formed the Commercial and Industrial Workers Union. So you know we had two different unions, and then Tau came about, right? Derek Knight once told me that Tau was as a result of an offshoot from CIW. There was some conflict between he and Eric Beer and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
But
More complicated than
Derek was the first president of Tau.
More complicated.
Unions and complications go hand in hand.
Of course. It's all about representation.
Human beings.
Yes.
Way that the agricultural workers would have felt that they were not represented properly and they went to hear.
Yes, but it's important to also mention that the TUC was formed in the town of Goa, right, with the two unions, right, and Clarence Ferguson was the first president of the TUC, right, and then in the 60s there were quite a lot of events. The CCL was formed in Grenada, the Caribbean Congress of Labour, in 1960.
Really? In Grenada?
Yes, in Grenada.
That's interesting.
Right? And other political events happened there, internal government.
So that goes back to what we said earlier. Labor is really at the heart
of
Grenada's
everything.
Of the core of Grenada's development and so on. So you can't really, put labor on the back burner. It has to be an engaging sort of, not just for salaries and better pay and all of that, but, even just in some of the social things in the country. Because labor would have a really good handle because we are the workers of the country.
Of course.
We are the people of the country. We are the voters of the country. So, labor would really have a good handle on a lot of the issues and how people feel about a lot of issues.
I think the importance of a program like this, because one of the biggest issues we have in labor today is that when workers leave school, well educated, join the workforce, they think that the conditions they meet, it's either was always there, or that the employer liked them so much that the employer provide these conditions.
Right.
But they have no knowledge that persons actually died.
Yeah, man.
And I'm not saying that in any figurative language. Persons actually died to get those conditions. And that, I think, is not known, and it is one may say it is a weakness of us, the labor movement, to sell our goods or sell our story. But I think it is one of the biggest issues we have to deal with, because you would hear people say, well, they didn't think unions as relevant today. And people say that up to the time they start getting problems on the job. Right? So
they realize they need a union.
So I could say in the past recent years, we have had more groups of managerial workers joining the union than in fact groups of, let us say, general workers.
They didn't think they needed protection?
They didn't think they needed protection until some bank getting sold or some foreign entity taking over a local company, and it is only then that they realize that, look, if we are to speak on our own by individuals, we're done. So as a result of that, we have had that, I'm not sure if I should call it phenomena, but we have had that situation where a good amount of the bargaining units we now represent are in fact supervisory and managerial employees.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So we're quickly running out of time for such somebody on Facebook is saying very informative program. As we're quickly running out of time, so how are you going to be marking the week? Well, there's one thing I wanted to ask, because three of you as stalwarts of the labor movement, here we are with this the situation, the 25% came up. We now have the drama with pensions and all of that, and the Pension Disqualification Act of 1983. How are we not able to sort that out until a year or two ago?
Just quickly, Brenda. Just quickly. We have been fighting this thing since I was in the movement, because remember, I'm retired now, demitted office. And we have been fighting this thing, indicating that, listen, the Constitution guarantees a pension, etc., etc. So there's no need to go and take anybody to court to determine that. But I suppose governments come, governments go, the situation remained the same. And so we had to end up going to court. What we were advised by our team of lawyers at the time is that we have to wait until somebody retire from the service, that they must get a letter from Ministry of Finance stating that they are not entitled to the pension, and that is what we want to take to the court. We took it to the court, and that is Humlin Armstrong was the one who decided that I'll walk with you to the court. But it was a trade union who funded everything. And so the Humlin Armstrong case, the judgment is there. So I do not understand what is this problem with the Pension Disqualification Act. The Constitution guarantees you. I am from a different school of thought. So I would not go with those who think that they're not entitled. The Constitution guarantees you a pension. The Pension Act is the one that would tell you how you're going to get your pension.
Okay.
Your pension, there's a formula in that act which tells you how they work it out. The gratuity is not an extra payment. It is part of your pension benefit. So when your pension is worked out, what you want to get is 25% upfront. Because you don't know how long you're going to live. Because most people want to take the 25% to offset their mortgage, the children going to school, etc., etc. The Pension Disqualification Act, I'm no lawyer, but the Pension Disqualification Act cannot supersede the Constitution of Grenada.
Okay.
But it is.
Where are we now with that, though? Is this settled?
The simple matter
They
is
took it to court.
Because of cost.
They took it to court.
Because of how expensive an issue it is, governments have a tendency not to want to pay.
And that's my question, is that to me from 1983 to 2018?
2018.
What happened in between there? Nobody ever
Just because of the cost.
So somebody have to touch it.
Well, they couldn't touch it until they get a judgment. Well, you get a judgment, so pay now.
No, as you said, you needed.
Yes,
you needed
somebody,
something.
a formal somebody.
Right.
That if they're reneging on the arrangement, then take them to court. So that was when it went to court.
Okay, so if we may,
sure, go ahead.
Our week of activities actually has started, or it started
yesterday.
We were up at St. David's. We went to church, so we started it the good way, right?
The right way.
The right way. And we actually went to Pomrose. The TUC, because it's island-wide, has a tendency to spread things around, so we don't really stay in St. George.
Right.
So we had services at Pomrose, the Pomrose Catholic Church. It was well attended by both the parishioners and also, as we had about between 25 and 30 members up there. So it was a good way to start that. On today, actually, I'm just running away from the activity now to be here, because we have had a training session which is being hosted by the Supriani Labour College, which you may have heard of. The Supriani College is I would say the best college in the Caribbean that deals with HR matters and labor issues. Right? They're part of the University of the West Indies, right? And we have 4 of them there. Let us say most senior lecturers actually here in Grenada now.
Wonderful.
And a session is going on now. That session is for the TV executive, which I'm part of, so I had to escape from that. Right? Tomorrow they would have a similar session, and that would be from the executives of all the unions in the island, at the Red Cross in not far from here. And the same group is going, so they're doing stage, because it's all leadership training and issues relating to HR, economics, everything, right? So we've tried to put a whole university program into 1 week.
Okay.
Right?
We're bright people. We assimilate. What's happening next?
Right. On Wednesday and Thursday, we would bring that program to the rank and file members like the shop stewards and union activists. So we've targeted them, right? So that the training program goes 3 TUC, which is the administrative body of the unions, then the practical persons in the union executives who are the functionaries of the union, and then it goes to the actual workers and shop stewards. So that training is, as I say, is in process now. I have to run back there after this meeting. And let me just say, our theme for this activity, this celebration, leads us to that, because the theme is actually GTUC celebrating 65 years, educating, empowering, and building capacity among workers. So we
building capacity.
So we look at the main issue of this as education and building capacity, which is something that it's a program we could not pay for. The Superior College, let me just say, is literally working free, but we could not afford, if we had to pay that caliber of lecturers to come here, if it is for a day, is not something that we could tabulate in money. Right?
Wonderful.
So they have been very cooperative with us. They also are now hosting the CCL, which used to be hosted in Barbados under the Barbados Workers Union, but they have now decided as a labor college to host the CCL, which is new, and there's reason for a marriage like that. Right? The last activity would really be the one before the last, showing appreciation while they're still alive for the past presidents of the TUC. So Sister Madonna, we're not waiting until Sister Madonna goes.
No,
or
she ain't going anywhere.
Or
but
Basil goes. So several of them are still around, and we would honor them during the course of this week. I think that should be on either Thursday or Friday. I think it is on Thursday. Wonderful. So we would honor them probably at the same training function, which is where all the young people that we want to influence are there. So people like Madonna and so would have a chance to influence and interact with them. And in all these hard work situations, there's always a fun thing.
Good.
We know it's Lent, but because of the celebration it is, we have decided to go on a Ramana cruise on Friday night. Let me say, we all have to pay. So although it's the fun ending to the thing because of obvious resource issues, right? So it's, and we encourage the general public. So if I may use your program,
how much?
It's $45.
$45.
Right?
Okay.
The regular thing, and I think we are on Ramana 1.
Okay.
The regulars would know the time Ramana leaves, etc.
No problem.
But we really want the public to support that because it is the end of the celebration. So that is the only fun thing related to our week of activities.
Everything there sounds like fun. I mean, the training, that should be quite exciting.
Very
Building
exciting.
capacity. Human resource training is critical for unions because you deal and manage and interact with people. So that is so critical.
And Brenda, the fact remains too that you, from time to time, you have new executive members coming in with no union background. So it's a very, very important to train and continue to have continuous training in the trade union movement.
Well, thank you so very much. We are so out of time. I kept you here longer than you were supposed to be here. The news is coming up next. But again, happy 65th. Thank you so much to all of you for all the edification and so you provided here this morning. I learned quite a lot, and I'm sure people out there did as well. All right, continue to be mentors to your younger membership.
True.
And that is important. Don't let them make you feel, all the days pass already, don't bother with them, they're gonna mash up the whole thing. The best thing is to hold hands together and forge ahead.
Thank you very much,
Best
Brenda.
wishes.
Yes.
And happy 65th.
Thank you
very much.
Nice for having us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. So that's our program, everyone. Our special guest this morning was Mr. Bert Patterson. He's the General Secretary of the TUC and also General Secretary of TAU. Mr. Elliot Bishop from the Commercial Industrial Workers Union, the president there, and he was, of course, very integral in the TUC as its treasurer and so on. Mrs. Madonna Harford, Lady Madonna Harford, she was here, of course. We know of all she has done for trade unionism, the public service community, and so on. That's our program. Coming up next, the Midday News.
When you think of Granville Cooperative Credit Union, what comes to mind? A reliable financial institution that has stood the test of time. Maybe you think about the convenience and quality financial service they provide. Do you think about their readiness to help you retire, achieve your academic goals, build your dream home, buy the piece of land or the elegant car? Or maybe the convenience of their different locations, Jubilee Street in Grenville, the sub-office at Belmont Estate, or the new outlet on Lucas Street in St. George's in the